America, and welcome to Happy Hour with Maestro Tim. I am said Maestro Tim, and my guest tonight is the great Chuck Swanson, Executive Director of Hancher, fresh off of his tour from Santa Fe. Welcome, sir. Thank you for saying yes and being my guest today.
Oh, Tim, what a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
So are you still in Santa Fe, or is this your home just down south of Iowa City?
We're in Iowa City.
Okay.
We came back to the warm temperature here, which is great.
Just in time, yeah.
And I heard you just had snow again.
No, just like, rub it in. Thank you. While Santa Fe was probably quite lovely, we were suffering here under feet of snow.
They have snow there too.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's good to be. I love Iowa.
Plenty to drink about. I brought some Chardonnay to the party. What are you drinking?
Cheers. A little Jack Daniels and Diet Coke.
Good for you. Cheers to you, brother.
Cheers.
All right. So Santa Fe, do you have a place there? Were you there for business?
Just
pleasure?
a very short time. It's really a beautiful, really an artistic community.
Yep.
There's so much, and then of course the mountains and the views are just gorgeous. This time of year, it's not quite the outdoor sort of experience, but a lot of great places to eat, although COVID, has of course changed a lot of that. But there's a history there. Kim, my wife, her mother lived there for about 30 years.
Oh, okay.
So we've been going for a long time. So there's a real connection there. And, it's an escape. It's just a short little getaway. And the people there are just so nice. Everybody's welcome. And I just love the feeling.
For those who are watching in our immediate area, I mean, there are certain artistic meccas in the United States. Santa Fe is really an artistic community. Asheville, North Carolina would be another one like that. On a larger scale, maybe Austin, Texas. When you go back to Santa Fe, what has that community taught you to try and replicate or build in this part of our country?
Well, I always feel like when we go to Santa Fe, really, Tim, I almost feel like we're in another country. Mm-hmm. A lot of it's the architecture, but also it's just, of course, in Iowa, we're not quite as diverse, but in Santa Fe, there's such a diverse population. And we have a friend there. His name is Nelson. He works at one of the greenhouses, and he picks us up at the airport, or really kind of is there to help us. We met him. He was an Uber driver too. And, his, knowledge, or the way he talks about it is, he said that Santa Fe is like a bubble. Everybody that comes is just so welcomed. And he said he has never felt that before anywhere else in our country.
Wow.
And so I don't know, I just enjoy that atmosphere. I enjoy that feeling. I love the diversity. Of course, the art is just to die for.
Well, that's just it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I love the back patio too.
Good for you. So, I mean, you've always been so in tune with dance in particular, with Joffrey and the American Ballet. Do you get your opera and ballet fix when you are also visiting Santa Fe?
We've been to the opera just a couple times, because really when we go there, it's pretty much just kind of low key. But the opera itself, what an experience.
That's a big deal there.
The two times we've been there, of course, you're outdoors, and then the weather changes so much, and the lightning and the thunder can be happening at the same time that, you have 50 singers, and the chorus all on stage, and it's the drama, it's the people, it's an experience that everybody should try and have at some point. But of course, they've been down too because of COVID. They didn't do anything last summer, and I think they plan to this summer. But just like us, everything is a little tentative. You just kind of don't know.
Right.
But really, the level of quality is just unbelievable in everything. But yeah, it's an experience that, we enjoy, but we haven't done it that often. But we plan to, hopefully more.
Yeah. We're going to talk about your beloved Hancher, because I see the wall of fame right behind you here. So actually, take your computer so we can actually see what all pictures you have there behind it. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what's going on behind you.
Okay. Well, you see, tell me if I'm doing okay. You see Tomáš Kubínek there.
He was our guest friend about a month ago. Yep.
Yeah. Tomáš. We'll have to talk about our project, Tim. There's Gregory Peck. And there's Aretha Franklin with our daughters.
So did Gregory Peck come to Hancher for some reason?
Oh yeah. It was called An Evening with Gregory Peck, and his wife, she was just, my wife Kim and I got to sit with her, and she was just lovely. And then he went to a party afterwards he was there for about an hour and a half.
Wow.
And that was in the fall. And then that December, we got a lovely Christmas card from him.
Oh, lovely.
And then I think he passed away just a few years after that. And there's Carol Channing. That was a fun backstage experience. And then there's Art Garfunkel.
Ha!
But I gotta tell you a Tony Bennett story. See Tony Bennett there?
Yep.
That was for our 30th anniversary. And Chuck Peters is a dear friend of mine. And Chuck and I were actually roommates when we were in college. And he said I said it, but I think he said it. He always would say, well, what are we going to be doing when we're 50? And so it was so weird. But the year that the two of us were 50 was Hancher's 30th anniversary. And he was working at the Gazette. He was, of course, president of the Gazette. And we're walking backstage because the Gazette had sponsored Tony Bennett that night. And we're going through the green room, Chuck and Mary Ann and Kim and myself. And I looked at him and I said, here's what we're doing when we're 50. So it was just a wonderful experience. And really, Tim, you can feel the same way. As it's the people, it's those experiences. That's why we do what we do.
Sure.
You know, it just, and I want to give a shout out to Diana Nolan, another dear friend, because Diana, she helps us so many ways. And I think Diana's an unsung hero, you know.
Yep.
She helps promote, and she really helps spread the story of the value of the arts, the value of, you know, and I guess how lucky we are to live where we live. But she always does such a wonderful job in her reporting. And I can't say thanks enough. And I know you feel the same way.
I sure do. As a matter of fact, let me check the chat room to see who's logged on. And hopefully Diana has logged on. And don't be shy, Diana. Say something if you're in the chat room. Let's see what's going on here. Looks like I'm not getting the chats. I'm refreshing my screen.
Maybe there aren't any, Tim.
No, I see there's 4 comments. There it is. Yeah. Kathy Varney's on. She's been to Santa Fe. Danny Redmond says hello. Oh my goodness, this guy by the name of Chuck Peters. I don't know who this guy is or who let him into the chat room, but we need better security if people like him are going to come in. He says no bourbon and water or salty dog. So
That's another story.
Okay, well then let's hear it, because I need some dirt on good old Chuck here.
Well, we lived, as I said, we were roommates. We lived in a fraternity, and Chuck and I really connected with our house mother. Back then they had house mothers, and poor thing, she really, I think she was lonely, and we just always before dinner we would go in and see her, and occasionally we would have a salty dog with her. And I'm not kidding you, she was smoked Tareyton cigarettes. And Tim, there was one night, and we were not in the room that night with her, but there was one night that I'm afraid it was her cigarette that started a big fire in our fraternity.
Yeah.
And it was in December. It was right before finals week. And we had to move out, and we had to find places to go. And so I was lucky enough to have a brother that lived there. He was 2 years older than myself. So Chuck and I moved into his apartment with him and his roommate. But we would go into the library to study or whatever, and we just smelled like smoke. And everybody would just shake their heads and say Sigma Pi. we were down having our dinner, and the fire just came all the way down the stairs. And I still think it was, God bless her, Ma Stoic. She was really a sweet lady. But Chuck and I just really always enjoyed our times with her. And it was salty dogs.
Salty dog.
Bourbon and waters came later in the evening, right before we were to go to bed.
Actually, I have to ask you one question about Gregory Peck, because he was one of my idols, and I never got a chance to meet him. Was he as patrician and elegant a man as he is portrayed on screen?
He was very eloquent, and I've got to tell you, there was one patron. There's one young law student that stood up, and she gave the soliloquy, you know, that was in To Kill a Mockingbird. And he was so taken by that.
Wow.
I'll never forget. She stood up, and I don't know what year she was in law school. but she so eloquently shared that. And he was just stunned. He didn't even know what to say. But yeah, backstage and he was just wonderful. He really was, Tim. It was so much fun. We didn't know what it was because it was just a conversation with Gregory Peck, and he was, pretty old at the time, but it was so well done. There were clips, of movies and that. But more than anything, it was the party later where he and his wife were they were just so generous with their time and so gracious. And it was one of those memories that we'll have for a lifetime, Tim. That's the thing.
So your wall there sort of encapsulates what we do for a living. We try and find experiences that make our community better, make a difference in people's lives.
You bet.
And you can memorialize it in a picture, but performance is fleeting. It's ephemeral.
Yeah.
You can't touch it. So what I would like to talk about today is kind of the business behind what we do, because the arts are also a business, and to get things from an idea onto the stage in many ways is the creative process, not just the show itself. I don't know exactly where to begin, because this has been such a strange year for obvious reasons. So let's go back a year, about this time last year, just as the shutdown was coming. What were your immediate thoughts and immediate sort of tasks that you had to do to keep Hancher afloat, but also with all the artists that you were contracted with? Take us back to about a year ago.
Well, first of all, it's hard to believe, Tim, that it's been a year.
Yeah.
It's just so hard to believe because it's gone fast. Some ways it's gone slow, but in other ways it's gone very quickly. So first of all, we canceled, I would say, about 20 to 25% of our season. And of course, we'd been through that with the flood.
Sure.
So we knew, a little bit about what all that, entailed. Although it was different this time because everybody was impacted. At the flood, so much more empathy came, from our agents and from other presenters around the country and everything. But now everybody is facing that, so I don't want to get into all that, but there was a real difference between the flood and the pandemic.
Yep.
So first of all, what I did, we belong to a group. It's called the Major University Presenters, and there's 19 of us. And these are like Michigan, UCLA, these are big presenters, right. Dartmouth. And so our facilitator, Jerry Yoshitomi, he's from California, and he said, connect with an epidemiologist and friends from your College of Public Health. Well, fortunately, because of the way Hancher partners across campus, we had definitely friends at the College of Public Health. So I connected with them early on, and our staff worked with them in terms of our staff worked so hard about putting together a document about reopening, because at that time, we thought, a few months down the road, right. We're also working on the season, the next season, the 1920 season. And so we, even with the College of Public Health, I'll always be so proud of this, Tim, because for a few months there, our staff was just going nuts because they're used to, like your staff, used to working yep. hard, right. Many hours. And so what we did is we partnered, which we had done before, with the College of Public Health, and we put together a webinar. And it was a webinar that really focused on reopening performing arts centers. And we were going to start this webinar off. This was in June, with Terrence Simeon playing a song, Change is Going to Come, the Sam Cooke song. Mm-hmm. He didn't sing it. I'm sorry. He played his accordion. But we had over 400 people attend that webinar from over 40 different states.
Right.
And it was a really kind of a cast of faculty from the College of Public Health that talked specifically about reopening performing arts centers. And at that time, everybody was wanting to know because we thought it was just a few months down the road.
Right.
And so we all felt good. The Hancher folks felt so good because we were doing something again. We were presenting, we were building an audience. And we were really, in this case, we were really presenting knowledge and really helping our colleagues across the country. And so that was really one of the first things that we really did in response to the pandemic. And then, as I said, we put that season together. And what we did, we decided to stage the season. Instead of putting together a season from August till May, we had it in 3 different sections. And of course, we canceled all 3 sections of the season.
Right.
So it was the uncertainty. It was the sadness of that beautiful Hancher being empty, and really kind of not together with everybody else, not knowing what the future was, and then hearing the stories. And so then, we got into a lot of different virtual sorts of programs, and really trying to continue to stay alive and really keep Hancher out there, and doing some quality programming. And we did some in the fall. We did some pretty cool stuff that I was just very proud of. But the virtual programming it's different.
Yep.
I think about you as a conductor and that applause, Tim. You've got to miss it. You have to miss that.
Yeah, well, assuming that it's there to begin with, yes. No, I have to tell you, Chuck, I found this year extraordinarily exhausting, only because we were doing the same as you, sort of by thirds or quarters of, seeing if we could at least do something every couple months. And having plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, scrap it going on. And actually was the contingency planning that I found so exhausting. But tell us a little bit about unwinding your audience, because your audience has expectations. They've paid ticketing. They've paid their subscriptions. And it's relationships with audience that is our bread and butter, and the reason for us being. So talk to us a little bit about how you stayed in touch with your audiences and doing the mundane things like ticketing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we were new to all this, like everybody else, the virtual programming. And so we really wanted, as I said, we wanted to stay alive as much as we could. So we were supposed to present in our season Step Africa, a piece called Drum Folk, which we were one of the lead commissioners. And this is a piece that really talks about the Stonewall Rebellion, which I can talk just a little bit about. The Stonewall Rebellion happened in 1739, on September 9th of 1739, and it happened in South Carolina. It was a rebellion from African Americans that ended up leading to I hate this word, but the Negro Act, that took away reading, writing, and drumming, and everything that African Americans, and like us too, everybody loves community and they love to belong. And so that's really when stepping and body percussion came about, because they had to build community. Yeah. And so we presented virtually on September 9th, the anniversary of Stonewall Rebellion, with other presenters around the country. And it was a piece that Step Africa really, they taped earlier in DC. They're from DC. They're the first company that's ever brought stepping to the world. They're about 25 years old. Brian Williams is the artistic director and the founder. And the piece was so well done. You could just feel, whenever you see them perform, you could feel it in your chest. And so then following that same night, September 9th, we had the video, which was tremendous. And then we had a panel. It was a Zoom panel. And on that panel was our mayor from Iowa City, Bruce Teague. And along with really faculty from, I think it was Columbia College and somewhere else, that really studied African-American history. And I've got to say, our mayor, Bruce Teague, just outshined everybody. He was so eloquent and just so wise about the things that he said. But the viewership, Tim, getting to your question, the viewership was amazing. I think we had 30,000 people, but it was, of course, other presenters around the country. But what I loved more than anything is Iowa had the highest percentage of viewership, and there were shout outs during the whole thing for Hancher. So that was lovely. And then we had Branford Marsalis. Then later, it was in October, was Winton, and it was Sounds of Democracy. I don't know if you got to see that at all.
I didn't, no, unfortunately.
But this was another presentation that had been videotaped earlier. And then it was videotaped actually at Rose Hall, in New York City. And that is the studio, or the performance space that has that window where you can see Central Park.
Oh, yeah, that's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it was beautiful.
It's a gorgeous facility, yeah.
Oh, but there were 7 musicians with Winton. And it was a suite. It was called, The Sounds of Democracy. And Winton had written this, and it was all about the pandemic and really response to political and social and economic, problems and issues that we faced trying to use music to show a better future. And there again, we had great response to that. We had great attendance. So it was interesting because we had the concert that had been videotaped, but then we had a little chance that Winton spoke in advance. It was videotaped earlier too, but just about Hancher. And it was so special. They're back to our audience to really make our audience feel, that Hancher connection.
Right.
And then we've got things coming up in the spring too, but then also our donors, as your donors, are very important to us. And so we've done a lot of Zoom cocktail parties similar to this with donors. And, Zoom is, I think people get zoomed out, but Zoom is really, for me personally, I've had a lot of wonderful, intimate conversations with Zoom. Zoom can be pretty cool too, And I'm having fun tonight, Tim. It's just amazing to me.
That's just the booze talking. Here, have a...
Yeah, no. You said one of your production people is actually in Kansas City. It's amazing to me.
That is
all of this
that is
stuff.
True. That we're so decentralized right now. Ed is just over here, and Sadie is in Kansas City, working other parts of tech, and it's you and me being talking heads. Yeah. It's good to be the king when you can just sit here and drink with your friends and take the credit for it. Hey, let me go back to the chat room, see what's going on, and hopefully Chuck Peters has been kicked off and see what's going on. Denny Redmond says the Winton concert was amazing.
Good.
Randy Reynolds says howdy, and he's drinking a gimlet tonight. Listen, that's pretty much I got. Oh yeah, and Kathy Varney also loved Step Africa. So,
good.
Yeah, you have a lot of supporters up here.
So can we talk about the flood when you and I first got together in the Java House?
Yes.
Commiserated?
Yes. Why is it that you and I seem to come together during crises?
I know, it's terrible, Tim. I think misery loves company.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. And friends really count.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget you calling and saying, let's get together. Or maybe I think it was I called you because of our dear friend.
You had this diabolical plan already cooking. Yeah.
This dear friend Tomáš Kubínek, who had this idea, and I brought even the program with me, Tim. Yeah. I thought you'd get a kick out of that. But had this great idea that he's this comic. He's so hard to explain. I always say he's the most charming, silly person that I know.
Yeah.
But very empathetic to others and very, very kind. He's got almost an old world charm,
very much so.
But Tomáš had done a tour with us years before, and he had this. When he left us, I said, Tomáš, if you ever come up with any great ideas, contact us, because Hancher's always ready for adventure. And so he emailed me out of the blue one day, and he said, I've got this dream that I would love to build audiences for orchestras, bringing his comic elements to the evening of beautiful music with an orchestra. And he said, you don't know of any crazy maestro that would fit this role, do you? I said, you bet I do. So that's what we talked about that day. And of course, you were game.
Oh, sure.
And and that must have been 2008 because this finally happened in 2010.
Right. Yeah.
And you talk about Orchestra Iowa, Tim. We took that all over the state. It was really beautiful. We started at West High. We had, I think, 2 performances.
Right.
Then we went to Luther College. Then we went to Cedar Rapids. I think it was at Sinclair.
Yep.
And then we went up to Mason City.
Mason City, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we finally ended up with the Omaha Orchestra. Right.
Yep.
But I tell you guys sound a lot.
I have to thank you because Tomáš has become one of my most dearest friends. And that would never have happened if it weren't for you. And what gave me great pleasure, because he's taken that show to Italy.
Oh yeah.
And when our music lands on the stands of musicians and it says Hancher Orchestra Iowa, I mean,
right.
Yes, I'm very proud of that. But when they also realize that the show that they're doing is of extraordinarily high quality,
right?
And
then Tim, when we opened our season, we built that.
We
with
rebooted it.
Wycliffe
Yeah.
Gordon, a
Yeah.
choir.
Yeah.
I mean, it went even bigger. But I got to tell you, my most favorite part, Tim, I almost get a little teary, is at the end when Tomáš sings, "We Love an Orchestra."
Right. Yeah.
You pop the beer, and the musicians in the back pop the beer.
It's what we do
But that
best.
song was just so heartfelt.
Yeah.
It was just beautiful.
Yeah.
And the chemistry between you and Tomáš. And what I loved is what he would do the rehearsal. He told me this, then I heard later from musicians, is that you didn't want to share too much because you wanted to see their response during the concert.
Correct. That's part of the show, actually. The best part when they are surprised. For example, on the reboot, when he comes out of he came out of the ceiling this time.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, what? That was remarkable. So hold on to that thought, because I want to talk to you about the future. Let's go back to the chat room to see what's going on. I haven't seen anything from Diana Nolan yet. So, there she is. Yes, two of my favorite people, she says. You are loved by many, Diana.
So did she hear? I wonder if she heard what I said earlier.
Diana, if you heard what we were saying about you, talking about you, most of it was true. Jonathan Swanson, came into the discussion late. Hey, it's great to see you. And actually, he's asking, is the Step Africa event available to be viewed online?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
But they're going to come, hopefully, this fall in our season.
Good. And that's a great segue. Actually, Blaine Cunningham, our librarian and tubist, was part of that. And this is one of his favorite orchestra Iowa memories was cracking open a beer on stage. Oh my goodness, Diana, you missed. We were singing your praises.
She's gonna have to go back and see it again, Tim.
Yeah, and shame on you. Let that be a lesson to you, Diana. That means you have to don't tune in late, because we're probably talking about you behind your back. Just
late for the curtain.
Yeah.
Late seating.
So the future. Are you doing the same as we are? We're doing a bit of a juggle for next season. There are promises and contracts that we made for this past season that didn't happen. We're rescheduling from this current non-season to next year. But there's also a mixture of doing something new just because the situations are different. Tell us a little bit about reprogramming or rescheduling and what that has to do with contracts and promises made and promises kept.
Right. Well, one thing, Tim, is that, as I said earlier, is that everybody is experiencing this.
Yep.
And so the agents and the artists have been very easy to work with, although, everybody's getting hungry too.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. And so we are working with moving a lot of the season from this past 1920 into 2021 or 21-22. That's working too, with our hope that we are going to reopen in the fall. But the fall is starting off a little bit lighter than what it typically is, and then building up more into the second semester. Here's an example: Step Africa. They're going to open our season because they were supposed to be in last season, and this is going to be drum folk, and you don't want to miss it.
Right.
And so we're talking to them, whether it happens or not, maybe outdoors to start the season in September outdoors. But then there's a problem with that, Tim, too, because it's so much more expensive. You got to build the theater, and it's hard to charge when you do an outdoor performance.
And it's risky.
And then it's risky. The weather.
Yep.
You've been Bruce Moore. I always, follow that every year, and you kind of, sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're not.
That's what alcohol was created for.
You bet. You bet. You bet.
Ed is also nodding his head back there. It's like, there's a guy who lives on an ulcer during the week of Bruce Moore. Yeah.
But we're doing everything we can, Tim, to really come back in the fall, But then I worry too, and this is for our audience, I really want our audience to feel welcomed and to feel comfortable coming back. Yeah. We've hired some infection mitigation coordinators. These are students from the College of Public Health. They're helping us with protocols and with preparing for a reopening. And so we're doing everything, that we can to really make it a safe and comfortable environment. And so, you too. We're going to this work. I really want people to respond, and I really hope people feel comfortable coming.
Yeah.
I think people are going to be the pent-up demand. All I hear is, we miss Hancher. We miss Orchestra Iowa. You know, we want it all back.
Yeah.
And so that's one of my worries too, Tim, is I really want to make sure that people come.
Yep.
That's really important.
I could be wrong about this. I think one of two things is going to happen. I think there'll be such a pent-up demand that there's going to be a rush to the doors, or the opposite, that people will still be kind of wary about enclosed spaces and wondering where we are with the pandemic. So I can either see the season starting with a slow crescendo into the winter, where by then I would assume that most things will be normal by then, or they'll just flood the doors. The offline, what Ed and I were talking about is the muscle memory of operations.
Oh yeah.
That is a real concern. I mean, we've been accustomed to working every week, 80 hours a week sometimes, just to get the show on stage, and being off for a year. There's some muscle atrophy when it comes to operations.
There is.
Have you had those kind of conversations as well?
Well, the thing of it is our staff, we're small, but I always say we're mighty, and they really have been. We've been faced with a situation too that our budget situation is going to be different over the next 3 years. We're going to be losing money from the university, so our staff has been very involved in a work plan, and we got 22, supposed to be 24, but there are 2 unfilled positions. So we have 22 staff members, including, 4 custodians, and everybody's been put on 2 committees. And we have, people who have never, understood anything about development serving on the development committee. So everybody's learning a lot about Hancher. And they're learning even, working with others that they know, but yet they didn't know them as well as they know them now.
Right.
And so our muscle is kind of being done in a different way. I think it's more mental, and it's more kind of building excitement, but we're really trying to work on this work plan that will help us manage this new, loss of funding, changing some of the way we do things, and really kind of doing our best to keep the quality and to really keep the mission of Hancher alive. We're even looking at, the mission, the vision, the goals. Yep. It's really kind of been a real, I almost feel like we're busier than we've ever been.
Yeah.
So, and then also what I love too, Tim, is we've created for the dance department in the School of Music spaces within Strauss Hall and the Hadley stage. After Len and Marlene Hadley, just lovely people. We've created classes. Sandy Boyd always called it the largest classroom on campus. And so we're living up to that. I think there are 12 classes every day between dance and music that happen in Hancher.
Yep.
So that too is really keeping the staff and everybody really kind of cooking. There's activity, and I love that. And especially students, that makes you feel real good.
I'm going to ask you a really difficult question. So
I'm going to turn on a light, Tim.
Okay. So continuing my interview with an empty chair.
I'm sorry. There we go.
I'm not sure there's I'm going to ask this question and see what you come up with. What is the one thing that you wish a typical audience member would know or realize about the performance that they've seen? Because I think what they're about to witness, from coming into the door to witnessing the production and leaving, they're just seeing the final sliver of a very, very long process.
Right.
What do you wish your average audience member knew about what Hancher does, or any performance arts organization does, to get the art to the stage?
I think probably, Tim, what I would love more than anything, and I think a lot of people do realize this, but not everybody, is the number of hands and minds that go into making that happen, and the teamwork. I always say that the Hancher staff is like this big cog. Everybody comes into it at a different time, but we have to make that wheel kind of keep going. Because really it's to make an event happen, it's a year-long process. The booking is part of it, but then there's all the advance work in production, the budgeting of that. And then when it finally does happen, it's the care and comfort of that artist. And, to me, the best experience, that happens is when that artist comes and they feel at home. You've been there before, walking in that stage door. And I always go back to our production team. They're really the first people that our artists encounter, and they're the last. And I'll tell you, we've got a team that is just, well, you've been working with them before, or you have worked with them before. They're magic. They're just wonderful people. And to me, it's those little touches, Tim, that make a difference. We all know it. And in some ways, I think I love the magic of it. And I almost think it's better for an audience member not to know all that.
It's almost like learning how the magic trick works.
Yeah,
you lose the wonder.
It's better to be a little green. Yeah. I think sometimes you lose that innocence, and it's not, the joy is not as much there.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a craftsmanship to what we do. For example, I mean, something as simple as a curtain.
Yeah.
You walk into an auditorium, there's a curtain down, there's mystery on what's happening on the other side of that, on the stage. What is that mystery? To be revealed.
Right.
And that's what that curtain literally opens you up to a new veil. Now, people who are in the performing arts business who do that every day, it's just a curtain. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's part of the magic,
Yeah. But Tim, they're there for a different reason than what we are. It's like going to get your COVID shot. We don't know all the background that's happened to make all that, CVS or Walgreens or whoever, but I don't care to know it all. I want to get my shot. And I think in some ways, I think a lot of that magic and mystery is okay to our audience, because I think people, and especially now with this pandemic, when people come back to Hancher or to the parent, wherever, I really feel like they're going to need to be there for their worries and everything else to leave. And I just want them to come and enjoy and come and be inspired. Right. And come and learn a lot of things about the world, and learn about, and just enjoying it with others, that common experience. I love when we talk about, you cracking those beer cans and that. I love to be able to remember things or hear stories from people who remember something that happened at Hancher years ago. I just think to me, that's one of the greatest joys, Tim, of what we do, is creating those memories. Yeah. I have a list of the history, and our history, Tim, is amazing, between Orchestra Iowa and Hancher. And you've been here, is it 15 years now?
Yeah, wow. My hairline used to come down to here when we first met. Yeah.
But what I have, the very first, is, of course, with the Joffrey.
Right.
And that was in 87, or it was in 88, actually, but the 87-88 season. And that was, get this, it was The Rite of Spring. And to me, that was, and also The Afternoon of a Faun. And that was complicated music.
That's hard
stuff. And, that was the year of the Nutcracker. And I'm not sure that Iowa Orchestra performed that year, because you performed several other years since. Yeah. You did in 2016 for the new Nutcracker. Tell us a little bit, what was that like?
Oh, that was actually a heavy lift, because they rewrote the first half of the ballet in terms of music. They took the music of Tchaikovsky and then reorchestrated it, because a lot was, they wanted musicians on stage. And they were trying and achieved the effect of having sort of a rustic, sort of peasant-like experience in the home before it opens up into this wonderland. Wow. And so to get the music rewritten and copied and bowed in front of the musicians, that's a lot of inside baseball. But when you're dealing with a new piece, literally a new piece, and the composer is constantly revising, the musicians really don't get the final draft until maybe a couple days before that first performance. And so that was an interesting part of the process of how that first half of the ballet was being reinvented. But it was also sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so Tim, what's it like to be able, to perform, on the stage usually, but then during that to perform in the pit? Like, how do the musicians respond to? I think of the difference between Tomáš's piece and then, being hidden, where the people in the first few rows can look down there, but otherwise the music is like coming from nowhere.
Right. It was a really interesting experience because unfortunately, when you can't see the final result, I mean, it's all on faith, because when you see it, it's like, oh, it makes total sense. Where if you're playing in the pit and you don't see the context, it's like, well, they're not quite so sure. However, they also knew that they were creating history because this was a major project with one of the world's leading ballet companies. And so they were really excited about doing something new with, actually it was new wine in old bottles is what it was. And so it gave them a new perspective on what was happening. They felt really charged that they were involved with a project of immense consequence for one of the world's leading ballet companies, and to be able to beta test that before it went into the world. That was a huge that was a huge opportunity for them.
Because those were preview performances.
Yeah.
Because the world premiere was in Chicago. That's the way we had to book it.
That's right.
But I remember this too, and this is interesting, I think, is that you prepared the orchestra. But then their conductor conducted. And I have to say, Tim, that the reviews from the conductor were amazing.
I know Scott very well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you hit it out of the park because they were so pleased. Well, so you had the work in advance. So I've got to ask you too, how are you doing it with your musicians now? We have our patrons, we have our donors, we have our audience, we have our artists, but yet, you've got this family of music. How are you keeping in touch with them?
Very difficult through tools like this. And frankly, our orchestra has scattered to the four corners of the earth. Through the last 15 years, fewer and fewer of our musicians live here now. I think about half of the musicianship is from the immediate area, and the other half is from any of the 4 states that border us. A lot from Chicago, a lot from Omaha, a lot from Kansas City. And so you've lost the connection of family. And so I've been able to keep in touch through Facebook and through venues like this, but it's not the same as picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, how are you?" So
you've got to have some time to really kind of boot up again.
I think next season is very much going to be a crescendo of getting our footing again, because it's not going to be like turning on a switch. It's going to take some time. So with that, because we're almost coming to an end here, I'm going to check our chat room one last time. Diana Nolan, the Rite of Spring was spectacular. And Denny Redmond says, making the sausage is not a need to know. Well said, Denny. Denny's a board member and also an amazing jazz pianist.
Oh, good.
And also Kathy Varney, her daughter worked there for 2 years and she loved it. I guess at Hancher, and she learned so very, very much. So I got to ask you, Tim, is the orchestra 100 years old now? It will be not next in 2 seasons. It'll be 100 years. Yeah. So what season? 2022? God, this is where I always get hooked up because we always. I know it's weird. 22, 23. I think, is that right, Ed? We're 98 this year. We're 98 this season. So 21, 22. So 22, 23. We are. That's Hancher's 50th. Really, Tim? That's something to celebrate. Yeah. We'll have to have we'll have to have a drink together. You know what? I think that cheapskate Chuck Peters could actually give us like quality booze. I'm waiting anytime, right. Chuck. 50-year-old Scotch. And none of that salty dog stuff. Oh yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Well, Chuck, if you could stay online so I can say goodbye and thank you properly offline. I just want to thank our audiences for tuning in today. And thank you, as always, for tuning every Tuesday for Happy Hour with me. Next week, my guests are going to be Ksenia Nosakova, who is a pianist and instructor at the University of Iowa, together with her daughter, Katja Moeller, who is a wonderful talent in the making, and she just won the National Young Arts Foundation Award. She is going to be something. And to celebrate that award and also catch up with two of my favorite people, Katja and Ksenia, are going to be my guests next week. Also, take the time to save the date, April 6th, for Happy Hour. My guest will be the great pianist, Manny Axe.
Oh, I was just going to mention Manny. We forgot to talk about Manny.
Well, Chuck, make sure you dial in, because you're going to want to see that.
I will.
And
what a sweetheart.
He is an amazing
He is
person.
a gent.
Yep.
He is really a gent.
Yeah, so that's going to be a great conversation. So thanks to the audience. Chuck, thanks to you. And which camera should I say goodbye to? This camera? Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. Cheers.
Thank you, Tim.